What is up?
Yo, yo.
Salty Dogs Podcast. Why do you always talk about a children's toy whenever we start the podcast?
I just love them.
Yo, yo.
Did you know that I'm
going to be like, Salty Dogs Podcast, Tinker Toys.
That's not the same. Mine is a greeting, actually.
Yo, yo.
I could just say yo. Yo.
You could say that too.
Anyways, how are you doing, man?
How am I doing?
Yes.
I suppose I'm okay.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's good.
That's good.
Yeah, did you want more than that?
I mean, I just was wanting to hopefully know maybe some piece of
You want to know
your
more
life.
about my life?
Yeah, I mean,
Gosh,
this
darn.
is the time where we start sharing some stuff. I have a couple things I want to share, but what's new in your world?
I'm just... new?
Yeah, you guys moved.
We did move. Yeah, so we're doing this whole debt reduction situation, and so we're renting out our home, and we moved in with my father-in-law.
Yeah, that guy Rave Damsey, right?
Rave Damsey? I did not move in with Rave Damsey.
No, yeah, his approach, Rave Damsey.
That's right, yes, indeed. The debt bow snall.
Right. That one was not as smooth or fluid.
Why are we doing this?
I don't know.
Are we going to
It's
podcast in Pig Latin today?
Let's do it.
No, I'm not going to do it.
So you moved?
So we moved, and that...
And you guys gave us a mattress.
That process, yeah, we give you king-size mattress.
That's great.
So it's going to save your marriage, bro.
Well, I will say this. The other day, I completely flopped my arm, and I couldn't feel Lara.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest
This is
thing ever.
wonderful. I have
This
all the
is so
room in the
good.
world, king-size
Yeah,
bed. But
I
then the
love it.
kids crawl in with you.
Yeah, that's
Have they
fine,
done
though.
that? Yeah.
Because I still don't feel them. And neither does she. I mean, there's so much room that we're fine.
King-size beds save marriages every year.
They do.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to hear a statistic on that, but we're not a statistical podcast.
I'm sure there are.
Yep.
There's statistics out there. Okay, so it was a pain in the butt.
So yeah, dude, we've been moving. We got all the big stuff moved. We have to do clean the house and do all that fun stuff. I have to paint a deck. I have to fix this, that, and the other. And so, anyways, it's been super duper crazy. And anyways, busy. Tomorrow's my wife's birthday, so happy early birthday,
Nice.
Kimberly. Yep. So
that's good.
She wants adult Lunchables for her birthday.
Like you're going to make them for her.
Do you know what adult Lunchables are?
Yeah, so is that you get the cheeses?
Yeah.
It's almost like
charcuterie.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, charcuterie.
Yeah.
Lars loves those things.
Charcuterous.
Charcuterie board.
Charcuterie.
Charcuterie.
So we like really good cheeses and really good meats.
Oh, I didn't realize I was just a lowly peasant and you're a,
You wouldn't know.
I don't know about extravagant cheeses.
You wouldn't know the cheese I eat.
What do you like, Limburg? Isn't that a cheese?
It is a cheese.
Right.
It's also a city, isn't it?
Something.
I think so. Isn't
Anyways.
it a city?
Well, it's at least a town north of us.
This is Steven Christians, by
Steven's
the way.
here.
He's hanging out with us.
Yep, he's Chunk and Deuce on the live stream. So anyways, enough about cheese and moving. Tell
Wait,
me
hold
about,
on.
what? You have a thing?
Yeah, I got some things I want to talk about.
I know. I was gonna.
Oh,
I
you were
was
gonna tell me.
segueing.
I thought you were about to
Dude,
dive
you
right
gotta
into
let
the
the
topic.
segue flow, bro.
Okay, go for it.
That was it.
Okay. So,
It's your turn, Chris.
couple things. Shameless
ahead.
plug. I started a podcast.
Oh, that's right.
I did. So I
We
started
didn't approve this.
What's that?
I'm supposed to approve these announcements.
Well, you drop your podcasts all the time in the midst, all 20 of them that you have.
Oh my gosh.
So I figured I could drop my podcast. It's not on Apple yet. It's still being approved, but for you,
Really? You're not on Apple yet?
It's on
Did you manually?
Do you have to manually
Yes.
do that? Oh.
They'll approve it like that.
What?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I need to go in and do that. Right now, it's on Spotify, and then whatever Google's is.
Google Play.
Sure.
Google Podcasts.
Yeah, it's the new one.
And you're on Anchor. And what's it called? What is it? Tell
It's
me all
called
about it.
the Living Water Church Equipping Podcast. So, anyways, it's a It's not really like a topical podcast. It's whatever the messages that I'm teaching on Sundays to equip our people to become more like Jesus and to live missionally. Those are kind of the topics that we're tackling. So I figured, man, I'm already coming up with this content. Let me go ahead and just record a podcast and put it out there. So
let's just go ahead and yank on that relational equity chain and ask people to go check it out.
I would love
do
that.
my boy Chris a solid and
That
go
would be
check out
great.
the Living Water Church Equipping podcast.
Yeah.
And so what do you talk about?
Jesus and stuff.
So just like this podcast.
Yeah, pretty
Why
much.
do you need that one?
Because this was
It's
on
not
my
enough?
own.
This is not enough?
I will actually get to talk on the other
Dude,
one because you talk so much.
You can't leave the band, bro. Don't Beyonce me. Don't go solo.
I'm going solo.
Oh, dang it.
I'm going. What's the NSYNC guy?
I went solo.
Justin Timberlake.
You're
I'm
going to pull
going
a
JT
JT
on
on
you.
me?
I am.
Dang it.
No,
I went
I'm
solo at the end of last season, and I only got 7 episodes in.
I will get 8. I'm determined to
beat me.
to make it. Yeah,
Yeah,
and they're super short.
Speaking of, if you want a 7-episode podcast, check out the Kingdom Life podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Anchor, and Spotify by yours truly, Jason Villanueva.
Yeah, we're just going at it now and just dropping all of our. You got a podcast you want to drop in, Stephen?
I don't have time for a podcast.
Except for this one.
So
That's right.
so my podcast, they're like 20 minutes, 25 minutes, somewhere in there. Let me see. I'm trying to figure out. Anyways, I don't know what I'm trying to say. It's just about becoming more like Jesus and living missionally. So the first couple episodes, I talked about actually what it looks
Jesus
like to spend time with Jesus, and it's just go look at it, check it out. I don't know what to say.
Look at it. Go
listen to it.
Dude, you got to work on your promo pitch.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting you to say pitch it. I just wanted to tell people to go listen to it.
Go. You've got the floor. Just go listen.
Give me $1 million and invest
People are
in my company.
all right. No, yeah, that too.
That would work.
You can give it to sourcewitch.com/give.
Anyways, second thing, Scott Erickson, the painter.
Yes.
I want to briefly highlight if you're looking for a new devotional, and you want to break away from something traditional like Beth Moore or whoever that it's like no shade against Beth Moore, but that's like a really traditional women's devotional to where it's like,
is that what it says on the cover of his book or in the forward? It's like, if you're tired of Beth Moore.
No, I'm pretty sure her publicist is watching right now, and we're going to get
I got a
cease and desist letter.
Facebook ad the other day. It said, sick of Beth Moore. It was like, click. Conversion.
Oh, man. So anyways, this guy, Scott Erickson, he is a painter, and he's awesome. If you can follow him on Instagram, but he just paints some very thought-provoking, Christ-filled art, I guess you could say. Like there's spiritual truths, principles behind everything that he does. Anyways, he wrote a book called, I don't even know what it's called. Dadgummit. I'm failing at this. Just go look up Scott Erickson, and then you'll see his new book out. But basically, what I love about this devotional is it's literally one sentence and one image, and that's the devotional for the day. And so you read this sentence and you look at this image, and it's really great because I feel like in a lot of devotionals, you hear what the author wants you to think, like their big takeaway, whereas they're dropping one line, and they're not always super straightforward either. I mean, you read some of them and you're like, that's a little confusing. What does that even mean? That kind of sounds like there's some oxymorons in there. And you go, you meditate, you pray, and for me, I go, Lord, what do you want me to take away from these images? What's standing out of them to me? And so it's been really refreshing. I haven't done a devotional, type thing in a long time because I have been sick of just the regular.
Sick of Beth Moore.
I don't typically do Beth Moore devotionals. Those are for our lady friends, I guess. Maybe not.
You're such a sexist.
Yeah, gosh, we've just lost.
Complimentarian.
We just lost 50 unfollows.
We don't
bad
lose
reviews.
people.
Oh, okay.
They love us.
Anyways,
they never stop listening.
if you want to check out his book, I'm gonna Google it really quick. Jason, I thought that's what you were doing, so I thought you would have been on it to find his new book, artist. I'm just going to type in book.
So while you're doing that.
Oh, I got it.
So while you're doing that.
Can I say it? I got it.
Okay.
May it be so. Check it out.
May it be so. That's actually what the word amen means. Yep. Indeed. So I grew up in Houston, Texas, and there was a church called Ecclesia Houston.
He's there all the time.
And it used to meet in a little like coffee shop / art house type place. And I went there with my friend Kimberly for church one time, and Scott Erickson was there painting live.
Really?
It's kind of, I think maybe, I don't want to say it's where he got his start, but that was his home church for a while. And so the pastor, Chris C., his brother's Robbie C. I don't know if you remember the Robbie C. band.
Yes.
Yep.
I do.
So anyways, also fun fact, when Hurricane Harvey hit Houston, we showed up about 2 weeks after it hit.
I remember that.
And then we went and did a mission trip, and Ecclesia Houston actually was partnering with other churches from the United States, the nations, whatever, to come in, and they were housing them and feeding them and giving them a place to work and all the materials and everything they needed. So Ecclesia Houston, shout out, and Scott Erickson, shout out.
Yeah,
so,
check him out. He's got some really thought-provoking stuff. I've just been enjoying it. It's been something that's been super refreshing to
fantastic.
not just read someone else's words, but
Yep. So speaking of shout outs,
yeah.
I want to send a shout out. I'm going to pass the salt
To who?
to my boy Rocky.
Rocky
And
Balboa?
No, not Rocky Balboa. That's like the go-to.
The low-hanging. That's extremely low-hanging fruit.
So dumb. Or Rocky and Bullwinkle. Come on.
Or that's like...
Anyways,
Yeah.
let me shout out my boy. Stop.
Okay.
Jeez Louise.
I'm so
just because you just
scatterbrained
recently
right
watched
now.
Rocky
It's
for the first
it's my
time.
favorite series, trilogy,
All right,
quad.
so we're going to dial it in.
Yes.
Rocky, thanks for the phone call, man. He actually just called me this morning. He actually called me last night. I couldn't take the phone call. He called me this morning, and he just said, hey, I just real quick wanted to call you and let you know I've been listening to the podcast again. He was listening and stopped for a while, started listening again. One of his buddies, Jared, so shout out to Jared also, was telling him he was been listening and has really enjoyed some of the most recent episodes,
Right.
and especially the one with Keith Giles, and then just the last one, the church planning discussion part 1, and also is something missing.
Is Something Missing.
So
Those are
just
like our
some of
last
those,
3, man.
Yeah, so just some of those last episodes he's really enjoyed, and so Rocky was like, yeah, I just want to encourage you, man. Like, keep doing what you're doing. It's good. I appreciate it.
Heck
and
yeah,
rock
man.
on. So.
Thanks.
Rocky told me rock on.
Thank you, Rocky.
Yeah, Rocky. So you know the drill.
Yo, Rocky, I hope you get
Oh
get to...
man, dude, we're more clever than that.
No, what? Hey, Rocky, what do we give people? Dude, I'm so out of it right now. I'm
We
like,
give people rosy cheeks.
rosy cheeks.
You
Yeah.
silly man.
I hope, Rocky, that you have the rosiest of cheeks, and you wear those with pride, man. You keep encouraging Jason because he
Right.
needs it.
Rocky's not a proud man, but he'll wear them.
He'll wear them.
Yeah, he'll wear them humbly
He'll wear them.
because he walks humbly with the Lord. All right, let's do this. Our guest today, Stephen Christian.
Hold on. We gotta. I'm gonna get it.
You
together.
got to get your stuff.
I'm getting it together.
We'll get it
Okay.
together.
We're good. We're ready. I'm
You
ready.
just need
I'm
to
in.
breathe a little
I'm
bit.
dialed in.
Do you need
I'm wearing this flannel and it's freaking hot, but I don't want
take
to
the
take it
flannel
off.
off?
No,
Just do it.
It's fine. I'm good. Let's go.
Do it. Do
Do you
it.
need a Beth
do
Moore
it.
Devo?
Oh,
He's got a Beth Moore shirt on. That's the problem.
Oh,
I got a Beth Moore
That's
sleeve.
classic.
Her face right on my arm.
So Stephen Christian, I think this is the first time we've met. You're a friend on Facebook. I think maybe because our church planning circle, but just a little bit of pre-recording talk. You've been a youth pastor 23 years. You planted a church. Right now you work hospice, and you said it's one of the, you love it.
Right.
So
and then I met Stephen
Yeah.
actually through a church planting, kind of like a church planting gathering that was happening in our city. We had 7 or 8 guys that were just getting together once a month, and so that's where I met Stephen. And yeah, that's how I know him. And then that's how you know him, because I know him.
And so we actually put a call out through Facebook and the podcast page. We've for a long time wanted to do a church planning discussion, and we wanted to talk to just a couple different people who've
Get some different perspectives.
get different perspectives, that kind of thing. And so, Stephen, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah, sorry for all of that. That was some of the most
No, it's
worst
dude.
banter
Stop
ever.
apologizing.
Yeah.
You make it worse when you do that.
I just want to highlight it so much
Yeah.
and just let people know, like, that was. Give us another chance. Go back and listen to another.
Look at all my
episode.
flaws. Look at all my flaws. Gosh, look at that self-conscious
I'm
guy.
virtue signaling.
Oh.
Anyways, Stephen, thanks for being here.
Hey guys, glad to be here. I've listened to several of your episodes or
Heck
watched
yeah.
them, and I think what I have loved about them is that even when you guys have brought up topics or have hit the topic from an angle that I may not be on that same side,
Yeah.
it stirs something within me to make me pause and say, okay, what's going on inside me to have that feeling?
Yeah.
And it's been a good work for me. I love it. I think that's part of, like, if we're learners,
Right.
we don't just lean into people that we
Yeah.
agree 100% with all the time.
Yeah.
We rub shoulders with people. We listen to others who may come at things at a little different angle. And I
Yeah.
think that's how we grow together.
I remember you told me that actually when I think we had eaten at the barbecue place down in Delano, and you told me
Yeah.
that, and I was like, man, that's awesome. And that's one of the things that I love. And I hope for anyone that listens to our podcast or any podcast, like, that is a sign, I feel like, of extreme maturity and wanting to grow. When you can hear other sides of something that someone's saying, realize, like, okay, I may not 100% agree with this, and this is causing a reaction in me. What does this mean? And
Yeah,
so I
right.
think that's amazing.
Yeah, instead of just writing it off, actually explore the heart check.
Heretic,
Right.
heretic.
Yeah, no, that's good.
And it's not always about even a disagreement. It's like it pushes against just what I'm known or comfortable with.
Right.
And so to have that rub is, I think, good and healthy, and I don't know. I
It
just
causes
like
some
it.
growth if you
Yes.
lean into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's that scripture. It says, "As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another." And I heard someone say, "Well, with iron sharpening iron, you better believe sparks are going to fly." I was like, "Oh, okay." So sometimes
Beth Moore say that?
you would know. You would have to tell me.
What series
so-
was that in?
I mean,
Yeah,
iron
right.
sharpens iron.
Yeah, right. That's right. So, Stephen, tell us a little bit about. So, this is our church planning discussion, and so I'm gonna leave it up to you, to where you want to take this
And how you wanna frame it.
and how you want to frame it. But yeah, just tell us your church planning story, and then as you talk about that, we'll kind of dig in and maybe ask a question here or there. But we want to give you the floor. Tell us your experience and what happened, what you did, how you're doing now. So
Cool.
Yeah.
Yep. Sounds good. So youth ministry, 23 years, kind of backed that up to like 2008. We put a pause on student ministry, went off to seminary, still did lots of ministry while there. I mean, you got to figure out a way to make ends meet. And
Right.
so did that during seminary, the whole time really thinking we're going to plant, our family's going to plant. People that knew us and loved us and have watched us grow up through ministry, they're like, yeah, you guys are built to plant.
Yeah.
My parents were in a mission organization that planted churches.
So you grew up all around it.
So I grew up around it, and it's sort of just there. So I've seen it. I've watched my dad plant churches or
Yeah.
revitalize churches and them grow from 10 people to one of them up to like 450. And so there's all these different things in my life that added up. And so we went to seminary, and we actually thought we'd go back to the town that we left when we went to seminary. And God,
which town was that?
that's a town in Maryland called
Maryland.
Easton. Yeah, so
Okay.
we're from the East Coast, and
Gotcha.
and so we went to seminary
Nice.
just north of Boston. And while there, we had this incredible moment where we're sitting with some friends from Austria, and they're like, "Hey, you should come back to Austria with us when we're done." And my wife and I were like, "Hey, we'll go anywhere but Kansas." Now,
wow.
Oh, you did it.
we did it. We did it.
You poked the bear.
We laughed, and they're like, "What's so funny?" And we're like, cornfields, Wizard of Oz. Have you guys seen Wizard of Oz? And they're like, "Well, yeah, we think so." They're from Austria again.
Right. Yeah.
And so that just really just tells you the limitation that East Coast people can have on. Yes. Yeah, we brought out all the stereotypes. I learned really quickly, by the way, that nobody around here appreciates Wizard of Oz jokes.
No,
So
no, they don't. It's like Rocky jokes if your name is Rocky.
pretty much. Yeah. So like two months into it, I learned the hard way. So we go through seminary. We connect with a church out here, and really thought that we would plant. We actually went back into student ministry, but that whole time while in student ministry, we got to just get a really like in-depth look at church planting. The church we were part of was very involved in our city with church planting. And they have just, I think, in lots of ways have brought redemptive qualities to church planting in this city that I think have just been good.
Yeah.
So, but I got a chance to learn really the inside scoop, so to speak, of watching church planters. These guys were my friends. They're on staff for a season. They go out and plant, and so you watch. And so we went into this totally aware of the hard realities. It's we like to think, or at least church planters or guys who want to be in church planting, we have this idea that somehow church planting is the sexy thing to do.
Right. It's very romanticized.
Oh yeah. And like, if I could only, and I just want to say to people, if you can only do something else, go do that.
Dude, you know what? I feel like last week, or the last episode, gosh, what's it? Travis
Maybe
said,
Travis.
Travis said the same thing. Like, if you can do anything else,
Right.
do that.
I mean, it's it's hard work. It's the reality. And, it's fun. You get to do great things. You get to see God do amazing things that only he can do, but it brings a toll. And so we thought we would plant and right away out of seminary. That didn't happen. I think that was that season that God was preparing us. But this idea of planting a church, like it didn't just happen overnight for us. We really sense like this is where we're going to go. God is going to use us. And even, as we were preparing to say yes to the call of planting, we had, anytime I would share it with somebody, like, you guys are made for this. You're just going to see an explosion. You're going to see tons of people come into Jesus. Yeah. And we went through assessment with an organization called Converge. Mm-hmm. And am I close enough? Is this good?
You're good, man. Keep going, yeah.
And so we went through this assessment with an organization called Converge. They raked us over the coals in a good way. It was healthy. They peered into our lives and got the actually I failed the Bible test.
Did you?
I did.
How? What? So can we talk about that?
What's the Bible test?
You said about being vulnerable. I think that's about as vulnerable as I need to be.
Yeah.
But I want to know what
Is
kind
that
of
just the books of the Bible?
What kind of questions they asked, and like how do you fail that?
Yeah, who wrote the
test?
Ten Commandments?
Who wrote them?
Yeah,
God.
Yeah, that's what I picked, but it's Moses.
That's false.
I know. So,
jeez Louise.
So it is kind of funny because my wife passed it with like flying colors. She should have been the lead church
Does she
planter.
do Beth Moore devotionals?
She does not. Yeah, it's been a while.
Well, that's why she passed.
Yeah, probably. I need to get on that. So
you've been outed.
I've been doing Jesus Calling too much.
Yeah.
Was that?
Oh man, you
that
can say whatever
okay.
you
That's
want.
good.
Okay.
That's
all right.
good. Yeah.
That's fine.
So we go through assessment and Converge. I just really think they did a great job on the front end with us and preparing us. They sat us down at the end of our assessment and just said, "Listen, we believe in you. We believe God is going to use you." But all of us came to this consensus, this idea that there is going to be spiritual attack.
Yeah.
And I remember saying, oh yeah, I know, we're ready. We're going to put a prayer team together. Oh yeah, I know we're going to face it. And I've been a Christian my whole life for a long time. Been around the church. I'm so aware that where God is working, Satan wants to destroy. And so I don't think I was being trite in that moment. Like I really knew that if God was going to be in this, that Satan was going to come on the attack. And at the same time, I don't want to be one of those where, it's Satan, it's Satan, it's Satan.
Hyper.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't want to look for every opportunity.
You don't want to give him more credit than,
Right. But I would say from the get-go, from the moment we landed back in Wichita after assessment, Satan was on. He was on it. He was ready. It was just like, and I remember just the weight of it and thinking to myself, I don't know where this oppression is coming from. I don't know why I'm feeling this way.
Right. Yeah.
And it was in July. So we went through assessment in 2018.
Okay.
March, April 2018. And by May, we were having gatherings to introduce about our church plant, connecting with people. I'll be honest, I've been in the city for 6 years at that point.
Yeah.
I really thought that this was just going to go boom, like gangbusters. I thought I would have enough connection, enough collateral. The idea of doing a parachute church plant never even crossed my mind that that's really what this was.
Right. And when you say parachute church plant, I'm not familiar
tell
with
us
that.
about
that
so that would just be this idea that basically I take my family, I drop into a city, I get to know it. So and boom, we spend the next 2.5 years trying to build a team. And after 2 years, you get to 9 people and you're excited. And seriously, these guys are, it's you go to Chicago and there are guys doing that and they're thrilled 2 years later when they got 9 people showing up on a Sunday morning. And so different context, obviously, and different people group and the way they're working. But I really thought like we would grow.
Yeah.
And so we met, we started, I finished up my position at a church I was working for. They blessed us. They sent us out. They cared for us. I love the way they handled church planting for us. Not only did we leave with just a huge financial gift from them, but we left with them supporting us through prayer, and that was huge. But we go through May doing these these conversations with people, actually part of April, May, and a little bit of early June.
So this is what most planters would call you're building your launch team phase, right?
Right. Yeah,
Okay.
we're building our team before we launch. So launch phase, gathering phase, those could be some of the terms. And by mid-June, we start meeting every Sunday night with our launch team. And
That's pretty quick, isn't it?
it is. It is quick.
Yeah.
But it was still sort of this gathering training. We'd come together, we'd worship,
Okay,
we'd pray
gotcha.
together, we'd pray for our city, we'd pray for each other as community, we'd dig into God's word, and then we'd just be sent out for the week. And we did that all the way through the summer of 2018. And we really sensed we're meeting at somebody's home. We really sensed that we needed to get out of the home because primarily what several folks were saying was our friends didn't want to show up to a church plant gathering in someone's home that they didn't know.
Yeah.
So I get that. So that's kind of sort of the culture that we live in sometimes, especially
Interesting.
when you live, not what I would say, not that Wichita's really inner city, but
Yeah.
if you don't live downtown, it's one thing. When you start living in the suburbs, it's sort of like, I don't know them. I don't know if I want to go into their home. That's a really nice neighborhood with big houses. That's a little weird. You have doing church plant there.
Yeah.
So I called a friend of mine up and I'm like, hey, you used to meet at this coffee shop. Tell me about it. And he told me about it. And as he's telling me on speakerphone, I'm beelining it down to this place. And
Was it Ecclesia?
Ecclesia.
Okay.
And little shout out to Rochelle. Hey, what's up? All right. Not that she's
Did
watching
you call
this.
Jeremiah
I did call Jeremiah.
Okay.
Yes.
He's actually coming on
next time?
next time. Yeah.
Is he
He
really?
gets to
gonna come
follow
on.
your act.
Oh,
Yeah, you gotta
Jeremiah,
see-
you are
set the
so
bar high.
blessed to follow me. So good thing. So we, I met with Rochelle. We talked about, where our church plant is, what our heartbeat was as a church plant,
Yeah.
our values and what we were going after. My big thing was we wanted to reach and engage people that were unengaged with the church.
So you weren't looking for swapping sheep. You wanted to we
Of
really
course.
want to find people that don't know Jesus.
Right.
Yeah.
So there was this balance where I wanted to build a team of people who love Jesus and love their neighbors and willing to run with that. And what I didn't want to do is build another well-established preaching teaching center in the city
Yeah.
because there's plenty of them and they do a great job. For me, the root of all of this had to be the whole intention of discipling and equipping the believer and going after the person that's disengaged from the church.
Yeah.
We have to hold those two intentions together. And the moment we give up on one or the other, we become lopsided. And I get why that happens in churches because you only have so many staff, you only have so many volunteers, and people feel pulled. I get
Yeah.
that. And so, but I wanted to run as intentionally as I could, holding those both out there, saying we're not going to give up on either one of them, because we give up on either one of them, we're giving up on part of the Great Commission and what God's called us to do,
Right.
to love Him and to love others. And so, so we started September.
Yeah.
We went over to Ecclesia and we started growing. And I was just like, wow.
Heck yeah.
We started seeing people come in on a Sunday night. That's when we gathered. People would come check us out. They'd stay a few weeks. They'd go. Then they'd come back. We would see people come and stick with us. And by November was when we hit our highest amount of people that were gathering with us. In the average week, we could see 28, 30, sometimes 35. We were gaining momentum. We were using Sunday nights really to do two things: to worship together. Worship, not necessarily meaning music, but that
Right.
we were praying for our city. And then we would use it for training, like equipping. I want to give you the tools to. I know you love your friends who are far from Jesus. I want to give you the tools on how to have those conversations with them.
Yeah.
And so for me, we had three things I just felt like were key for our core team, our launch team, whatever team you want to call that.
Yeah.
That team of people that were gathering together saying, yeah, we're running with you in this mission. And that was that we would give generously to the mission financially, that we'd serve generously into the mission, and that we would invite generously into the mission. that we all were going to engage those who were either far from Christ or disconnected from the church. That was key for me. I mean, it was stressed every week. It was talked every week because I was the one that had to champion the mission.
Right.
If I didn't champion the mission, I couldn't count anybody else to do it. It was my job to do that.
As the church planter, you got to be the carrier of the DNA. Like, you have to be the person that's setting the tone, help creating the culture. And so you're running and sprinting the hardest out of anybody, oftentimes the lead pastor and their family.
So let me ask you, just during this entire process, so you did your assessment with an organization, and then you were sent by another church, a mother church essentially, or a sending church. But did you have any kind of coaching or anybody kind of looking over you or trying to get you to do things a certain way? Like, what kind of oversight or expectations were there for you by any kind of organization or person?
Sure. That's a great question. So I didn't actually pick back up on that. We launched with Converge.
Okay.
You did launch with them. Okay.
We went with them. They offered a coach. His name was Jeff. Love Jeff. And he and I met weekly, usually Zoom.
Yeah.
And he was careful to not dictate what we would do, but was very available for conversations, for guidance, pushback at times on what we were thinking.
Right.
And so he took a break from some things in the fall, right around the same time all of this was ramping up. So for this season, I was sort of trying to navigate some of these things on my own. And so when he came back into coaching, it was sort of this like fire hydrant of like, I got to solve this, I got to solve this, I got to solve this.
Yeah.
The poor guy, I look back now, he needed to be paid a whole lot more. I don't even know if he was paid, but if he wasn't, I'm really sorry, Jeff. You should have been. But he was a church planter for years himself. And
Gotcha.
so they would offer support. They offered financial backing as well. I really feel like Converge did a pretty good job in being there for us.
Right.
So we grow. We're like living into what I feel like is like a good rhythm. And the holidays come around, and December hits, and we start seeing downward spiral a little bit. I'm sort of thinking, this is just part of it's holiday time, and
Sure, part of the deal.
people are busy. But one by one, people were dropping off, and it wasn't for any one reason. It was
So were people having conversations with you, or did they just not show up, or both?
both. Sometimes it was I was finding out from a text message from them. Hey, by the way, I'm not coming back anymore. Thank you, though. Be praying for you.
Sure.
Sometimes it was hearing third hand.
Right. So and so, whatever.
Right. And sometimes people would call me up, sit me down, and just say, hey, love what you're doing. It's just not who we are. Or we really see now that church planting is hard, and we just don't know if we have what it takes. And I'll be honest, those are the people I loved talking with the most. Because I get that.
Right.
I get how hard it is to leave a well-established church that has a lot of programs for your kids and for your family to jump into a launch team that we can't promise you anything right now.
Yeah.
Right.
And so
the only thing we can promise you is that you're going to have to do a lot.
Right.
You're going to have to run with us.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I get that. And I get the tension. So I vacillated with that because I'm sort of like one day I'm like, I'm doing it. I got 3 kids. I got, one in high school, one in middle school, one in college. So I get the sacrifice. But what God had to really do in my life was to remind me, Stephen, that's the call and sacrifice I've placed on you. Don't dictate this and expect that everybody else should have the same sacrifice. Let me deal with that. It felt like he was really impressing that on my heart. And once that happened, there was a huge release of when people would say, hey, we're out.
Yeah.
My whole thing was, I want to bless you and send you back.
Sure.
Whether you're going back to the church you came from or you're going to go find another church.
Yeah.
I don't want you on the team if you're not 100% in. And it's not because I don't love you. It's what I want, but it's what I want. It's what I believe is best for the team and what I believe is best for your family.
Right.
Like, go be at a place where you can grow, where you can serve, where you can engage lost people in culture that's working for you. And I'm not
Yeah.
going to define that. I just know here in our
Yeah.
church plant, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
So we launch into, we go through Christmas season, and then we did this thing. We rented out a party bus. By the way, greatest thing in the world.
Yeah.
Loved it. We rented out a party bus.
Oh, that's where you guys went to go look at Christmas lights, right?
Yeah.
I think I saw that on Facebook.
Yeah. We 10 days after the lights were taken down, but we went the Sunday. It was like the first Sunday in January, and we went to the home of everybody in our launch team. We got out of the party bus, and we prayed for their home as a mission field. We prayed for their neighbors on the left and the right and across the street from them. And I'll just tell you, it was just beautiful. We sang. Throughout the throughout the bus ride, we prayed together. It was a really cool season.
Yeah.
But the crazy thing is we took a massive nosedive after that, numerically,
Yeah.
from a standpoint of trying to build a launch team.
So is this coming like now into 2019?
This is into 2019. It's January of 2019. We're now dipping down, and basically, I look at my team and I just said, "Here's what we're going to do. We're not going to train together. We're not going to do anything but pray together for the next month, and we're going to pray. And I just want you to ask the Lord 2 questions: God, what is it you have for me and my family, and what do you believe God is saying to you about Frontline?" And so that's what we did. And we'd gather still on Sunday nights, but we just gathered to pray.
Yeah.
Pray for each other, pray for our city, pray for, you name it. We spent the night praying together. Beautiful season. We gathered at our home, Carol and I. Carol's my wife. I don't know if she's watching, but if you are, hey, what's up? Sorry, little shout out to her.
Yeah, you're good.
Totally
You're
fine.
good.
And so we gather at home for breakfast, because it's always better to have hard conversations on a full stomach. And
100% agree with that.
I had Chipotle before here, so I'm not so sure if that was good, but and so we gathered together, we spent time praying, and then I just said, "All right, guys." And the crazy thing was, she's an RN, and so she had to work that weekend. So the one question I was going to take off the table, it was Super Bowl Sunday, the Sunday that the Patriots won. In case y'all need to be reminded of that. Anyway, so
Yeah.
That was like, what, 8 Sundays?
For
8 years in a row.
Yeah, right.
And so we gather there. She wasn't going to be able to make it, and so I wanted to take the question, what is God saying to you about Frontline, off the table?
Yeah.
Because I wanted her to be there, a part of that conversation. So we were going to gather, we were going to pray together, we were going to say, hey, what has God been saying to you about your life, about who he is, where you are as his child? And so I just threw the question out there, and one of the gentlemen I love him, he's a dear brother of mine, great friend. He just looked at us and said, well, I heard from the Lord, and we need to leave the launch team. And all of a sudden, immediately,
Gosh.
I had this pit in my stomach, didn't see it coming.
Yeah.
So
How do you recover from that,
Right.
in that meeting?
because the way I released everybody else, which I was hoping would be like with a reasonable amount of grace and go,
Yeah.
I knew I had to respond in that moment in a way that would not put anybody down, not be destructive, but would be encouraging. And I wanted to in a moment, halt that conversation, and because Carol wasn't there, but I
Yeah.
knew we had to deal with that conversation. And in walks Carol. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. On all the weekends, she always has to work all weekend, and she got off. And so they released her early, or she didn't have enough patience, to see. Not,
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
She's got plenty of patience. She deals with me. And so we had a really, I think, just honest, hard conversation
Yeah. With everyone there.
with everyone there. And now at that point, everyone being 11.
Gotcha.
And so now this couple saying they're out, we're 9. And I'll be honest, what I had been hearing from the Lord beforehand was, don't launch. Don't launch. Don't launch. don't launch. What I was hearing from my coach, don't launch, don't launch. What I'm hearing from other guys who've been in church planting, don't launch, don't launch. Like, do not launch right now.
Mm-hmm. And that was what month? When?
That was
January, February?
February.
And at this time, when was your scheduled launch date?
We hadn't picked a schedule.
So you hadn't picked one yet.
Right. We were really working off a numeric number of, we needed to have about 60 people for Converge to say, based on our context of living in a middle-class suburban sort of environment.
Yeah, gotcha.
So
you're almost like, we need to get to capacity before we do this. So it was whenever you hit capacity.
So you're about a year in.
We're 10 months.
10 months in.
Yep.
Almost a year of a launch team.
Yep.
Okay.
And in all reality, really 4 months into with a lot of those people that were running with us, because they weren't necessarily running us with us in the summertime. The crazy thing is, from the majority of the people, what we heard was, let's go for it. Let's just go for it. What do we have to lose? And I remember, like, I think I met with the church planning group like the week after. I'm like, this is what they're saying to me. One person said, just preach, they'll come. Thank you, theology, Field of Dreams. So like, just preach, they'll come. And so maybe that was just, they really believed in me too. And they believed in the work and the mission of the church. And there was one guy on our team, just super trust. I just trust him a ton. And he just said, my job isn't to tell you what to do. My job, he said, I really believe God has called me to support whatever decision. And that's really not what I wanted to hear from him, but it really was what I needed to hear from him. And so I sat on it for about a week. And I mean, looking back now, I can say this. I don't know if I would have said it then, but there would have been people on the team who, if I had said, no, we're not launching, we're done, there would have been people on the team that said, you didn't give it all. You didn't lay it all on the line. You didn't like do the ultimate sacrifice. And I think to some measure, I would have said the same thing about myself. Like I would have said, like, if we had never launched and we just shut down then, there would have been a piece of me that would have wondered, like,
right, what would have happened?
What would have happened?
Yeah.
And so we launched 2 weeks later with 9 people, actually 10 people, because someone jumped on in that 10-day window. We launched and we went to the zoo.
Right.
We knew that we only had the zoo for 3 months. When we showed up to the zoo, someone had already signed a contract to start in June.
Right.
Good old shout out. I'm glad you guys are there though. So keep it going. I hear great things. And so
our buddy,
but I think that was all part of God's plan. And so we launched, we continue to see growth. We're starting to see people come. Some people come and check us out. But through all of this season, really from like August until February of 2019. So from August 18 to February when we launched, I would say it was like one massive spiritual attack. Like just anything that could go wrong. Like in 1 week, we had our fridge die. My son was in a car accident and I had unexpected surgery.
Yeah.
Like just boom, boom, like things that everyday normal people deal with, all just kind of coming at once.
Right.
Let me ask you a little bit of a theological question then. Do you feel like all that happened because you were in the process of church planning, or do you think had you just been youth pastor still, that stuff would have happened? I know it's kind of hard to like think about, but
that's a great question. I think it would have happened regardless.
Right. Okay.
I really believe that God allows stuff.
Sure.
Some people could say he caused it. Some people could say he did. But at the very least, he allowed these things to come into our lives.
Yeah.
And those things did inform us and form us and who we are. And I think
that's good. Inform.
I think really helped us.
But then just with on top of these pressures, are you stressed during this time? Are you okay during this time?
No.
What's going on?
No, I mean, all the way through February and up through launch, I had massive anxiety and panic attacks.
Yikes.
I was, so going back 2.5 years ago or 3 years ago, working in another church,
Yeah.
began having panic attacks and anxiety. I actually thought I'm in my mid-40s. I was having chest pain for about a week, thought that it was heart one night. I thought it was the big one, literally. I couldn't breathe through it. My wife rushed me to the ER after several days of workups and heart cath and all that. It was stress, anxiety-induced panic attacks. Yeah. And what they said was when men experience that from 40 and older, it can be something they battle with for a long time after that. And I really, it was one of the things where I just was like, yeah, whatever, this is situational. And for a while it was good, but I watched anxiety rear its ugly head. And the crazy thing is I wish the church could do more about it.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask you, because I know another guy here in the city who straight up, I sat down with him a couple months after they launched. He had gone through the whole situation, and I was like, man, how are things going? Like, how are you? And he was just like, just to be completely honest, he's like, I've been suffering from depression the past 2 months. He's like, I don't want to get out of bed. I don't want to be around people. I don't want to go to church. And so you're not the first person that I've heard talk about either anxiety or depression or panic attacks or stress being something that's prevalent during the plant. Occurring. Essentially, is this something that maybe you saw happening with some of the other guys who've planted just in your network before you?
I don't know that.
Okay.
I wish I'd had more of those conversations, but I think, I know my experience. I remember after I came back to my church, so I took off like 2.5 weeks. This is, again, 2017, I think.
Okay.
But it's about 2017. And I remember coming back to my church and I'm like, I am not going to be that pastor that doesn't share. Like, I want this to be something that God uses for his glory and for hopefully the mutual benefit of somebody else in my church. And the crazy thing is what I experienced was, for some people were like, hey, thank you for sharing. This is phenomenal. I'm glad to know that there are pastors that are struggling and they're willing to share. And then some were a little more patronizing. Oh, thank you for sharing. We'll be praying for you. And then some just downright didn't know what to do when one of their pastors is dealing with anxiety and panic. It could be for a lot of reasons. Are we causing that? Are we the cause of that? Are we not the cause of that? Did I do something? Did we do something? Could we have done something different?
Right.
As opposed to, I don't need you to fix it. Like, maybe there was something you needed to fix, but I don't need you to fix my anxiety.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, how about you listen, and how about you just embrace and encourage me through the battle? Just recently bought a sweatshirt. There's an organization out there called Outrun the Darkness. And their whole thing is they use and they promote running to help people battle depression and anxiety. And I just recently came across it. But I will tell you, the reason why I run, now I love to run. I enjoy the sport. Some people, it's their punishment.
Same here. That's me.
I engage people every Monday, typically Wednesday nights, with that aren't like me, from different backgrounds and different walks of life.
In a running group or something?
My running group. Yeah,
cool.
I love them. These people are just solid people. Love hanging out with them on Monday nights.
Yeah.
But one of the other primary reasons why I run is I'm either going to have to be on medication, which if that's what someone needs to do, go for it.
Right.
For me, I'm choosing to say I want to try to manage anxiety, depression with running.
Sure.
And so that's why I run a lot. And it's been great for me. It helps me mentally to clear things out.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of reaction with hormones in your body and that kind of stuff that, it's great for your brain.
Yeah. And at this point in my life, I don't hide behind it. I want people to know about it. I don't I don't have to wave the flag, but I want people to see there are people that love Jesus fiercely love their city, love their family, and they still struggle with anxiety and depression.
Right.
And be okay with it.
Right.
Like, just be okay with it.
Yeah.
And so, so we hit this season where we're going to launch, and I had anxiety. I just, and just battled with it. And I remember telling my launch team, hey guys, I just need you to pray for me. I need you to pray that I will manage, like, my anxiety is because I'm not trusting Jesus. Now, sometimes some of my anxiety is because I'm not trusting him. I get that.
Yeah.
That happens. I've done that. I probably will do that in the future, but that's not what this was about.
Right.
And so I remember saying it in our group, and someone asked, hey, why are you anxious? Why do you have anxiety? And I remember just sitting there, I just don't know. And some of it was I just didn't want to say.
Yeah.
And then I had someone that was sitting in that room that self-diagnosed it and said, well, this is why. And I'm like, that wasn't helpful, but okay, let's move on. And we're launching next week, folks. All right, let's go.
All right. Here's your inviter cards. We'll see you next week.
Yes, right here at WICT. So I wanted to say that. So go ahead.
I was going to say Matt Brown's been listening, I think, since
Yes.
the very beginning. So let's just kind of look at some of these comments. Stephen Christian, one of your best guests this season.
Ooh.
And then I said, our first episode was our best guest, which was him. And then he said, yeah, your first episode of the season guest was the worst. We were just joking. But then he says, the church needs to talk about anxiety and depression, bring darkness to light. The only way darkness can be defeated. And then he says, time for pastors to be honest and real with their congregations. And so, I was going to actually reference the first episode of our season, which Matt Brown came on, and we talked about depression,
We've
anxiety.
had a lot of people message us about Matt's episode where we talked about that.
Well, we talked
It's been
about
super helpful.
depression, anxiety, and vulnerability.
Yes.
And so really we felt as though we were trying to pave the way for this season to be honest and vulnerable with and just open. And I think we've done that even in some of these episodes where we just kind of said what we wanted to say.
Well, dude, I mean, I just even want to let's just get super vulnerable. But I mean, I even shared a conversation with you, and it's really interesting being on this podcast and pastoring at the same time and leading a group of people because I've always done it from a state of vulnerability. Now, some people don't know how to respond to vulnerability. Now, vulnerability with things that I'm personally wrestling through in my faith. And so there's some people that might go, hey, bro, you don't need to be leading anybody right now. Like, you can barely lead yourself. And to that, I'm like, dude, I'm right where God wants me. I'm in process and I'm there and I'm trusting him all along the way. But there's a level of you got to be careful almost with what you say that comes with being a pastor. It's like you can be 50% real, 20% real, 70, like what's the percentage? And honestly, I think you just got to kind of go with wherever God is leading you in that moment. But there will be people that are like, bro, you just need to trust Jesus or XYZ. They'll give their own diagnosis of what it should be. But it's been really interesting pastoring, leading, with a church plant right now, while I'm in process, being vulnerable, saying the things that I'm saying, and getting pushback from people, having conversations to where, people have stepped out of our community because of things that I've said on the podcast. And that's really hard. It's a really difficult, really tough thing. And part of me kind of feels like the ant that's holding the magnifying glass above himself. Like, am I doing this to myself? Right.
Well, I was going to say, I think with the podcast and with this setting, we tend to be pretty open. And it's interesting because there is an audience and we don't know who they are. We don't know who's going to listen or what. And there's some people who, as you found out, feel a certain way and have a certain opinion, but then never share that with you. You have to find out third party or whatever it is. Through the grapevine, or you find out months down the road, like, hey, I listened to one episode and then I just couldn't do it anymore, but I think also because I'm family and because you and I, like our relationship is close and it's tight and you can say whatever you want to say and I can say whatever we want to say. So you put us at the table together and we're going to say things because we're comfortable with each other.
Yeah.
But there are things that you've said on the podcast that you would never have said if you were having coffee with somebody at Starbucks
Yeah.
talking about the same topic.
That's true,
You know
which
what
is
I'm saying?
super interesting
It's
because
super interesting.
because it's like what, but man, and Stephen, I hope you realize like even just the last 5 minutes, 10 minutes, the things that you've shared, like there are people, pastors, people who have helped planted churches that have heard some of the things that you've said, and it's resonated, yeah, that word with them. They felt it, like I felt that, and that is why I think we take those risks and we say those things, because we know that it may be at our detriment and at our reputation, but there are a marginalized people group, or maybe an unrepresented people group that are processing through things, that are thinking through things, that are feeling things like anxiety, and the church is starting to do a better job. I mean, I feel like we're trending upwards with beginning to talk about these things, especially with recent passings of pastors and things like that. And so we're trending upwards, but these conversations are so valuable, especially when we're able to lean into that vulnerability and able to share, like, it's almost like come and see what the Lord has done in my life, and what he's currently doing and where I'm at now. And I think that's why these conversations matter. That's why your vulnerability and every other guest that we've had on, and our vulnerability is so important. And leading from that position, it's a game changer.
And I'll just tell you, I can't sit by and be one of those pastors that doesn't share this. Mm-hmm. I just can't. I can't be one of those guys that paints a picture that everything's perfect, that everything is just great, because not everything's perfect. Not everything's great with my family. There are hard times.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm just like, I'm going to share it. And if that makes you uncomfortable, then I'll pray for you. I know another really good church you can go to. Let me give you their address.
Their pastor loves to hear these things.
I'll just airdrop it.
Yeah.
So we go through, kind of just segue back.
Yeah, for sure.
We launch. And I think we're, for the first part of the launch, it went really well. The team worked well together. They served well together. They were figuring out the giving part of giving generously. Mm-hmm. The piece that I don't think we figured out as a community is, what does it look like to continually engage people who are disconnected from the church?
Right.
And I kept seeing that over and over and over again. So June comes, we move out of our building. We thought that we were going to move into another building. We had another building ready to go.
Dude, and I remember you bringing that up at our, when all us church planners got together, and you were like, dude, we got this building and there's all of these problems, the flooding and all of that stuff.
Yes. We had this building we thought would be perfect, that it would set us up to do exactly, it would give us great space for kids ministry, for corporate worship, for some outreach stuff. And just like that, it was taken away because of an inside flood.
Right.
And I remember just the sinking feeling. And I went, after about a day, I went, okay, God, you're in this. If this isn't going to work out, it's not going to work out. And we tried for multiple days and it didn't work out. And I had to make the tough call at that point to say, okay, we're going to go back to the coffee shop. Super grateful that we had that location to go back to.
Yeah.
But that meant that we had no space for kids programming.
It just changes the dynamics of things.
Completely.
Yeah.
Almost in a way, sometimes for people to feel like you're going backwards. Like, I thought we were moving forwards. Now we're going backwards. Where's God? I thought God was in this decision. Like, it's tough.
And we had people at that point leave our launch team.
Of course. Yeah. Every time you move.
And so we, at the same time, I'm meeting with our management team. I had an outside management team of some church planters and our district minister, gave them all the sort of data about our team and how we were engaging people that are disconnected from the church, how we were giving, how we were serving. At the end of the day, they said, no matter how great these two areas are going, you're not figuring this out and engaging your neighbors who are far from the church or far from Christ. Mm-hmm. And these guys this was the first time we met as a management team, and they're from different parts of the country. Some of them didn't know each other, and some were not even on that call, but I talked with, they had the data, and all of them very consistently came back and said, shut down, shut down.
I've got a lot of stuff going on in my brain right now.
Okay.
And I'm trying to nail down what I want to actually nail down. Earlier in your story, you talked about how people don't want to go into somebody's home they don't know. It's weird. Like, what's that going to be like? I don't know them, or all eyes going to be on me, or I'm socially awkward, whatever reason. But then I hear your heart in wanting to equip people. You're wanting them to love Jesus, love their neighbor, be intentional. Like, these are all things that I think every pastor and every minister desires. I want that. I want that for me more, right? Like we all want that for everybody. But I think what it boils down to is that there are a lot of people who aren't ready to engage on that level. You know what I mean? Like there are, I don't know. I mean, I know people who really want who want to reach their neighbor and actually doing some things, but the majority of the people that I know aren't doing that. And
it's like, I know what I ought to do, but I'm not.
Right. If they had the opportunity to do it, they might not, for fear or for whatever it is. So I think what I'm hearing is that, I don't know, man. I wonder if people were really ready for that.
Well, the bottom line is I would say for a lot of the team, it probably was no.
Right.
I would say they want to see people come to know Jesus and follow him. I think that is their heartbeat, and they're willing to give towards that, but to jump in the fray of that, I understand that's hard.
It's hard. Yeah.
I get it. I mean, right. I would tell them, hey, just because I went to seminary doesn't make it easier for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, in fact, and just because I'm pastoring a church, it doesn't make it easy. In fact, I think there are a lot of things that get in the way that we have to work.
It's almost
through.
harder as a pastor to do that.
Let me share something. I think I've shared this before. And actually, so Jeremiah had me come speak to his launch team, and I told this story.
And then it dropped by 50 because you spoke. At his
launch team meeting at Ecclesia, I gave this talk, but when I was church planning, there was all this pressure to get people through the doors, and we had already launched, and it was just like, you got to grow, you got to grow, you got to grow. And it was like invite. And so, because it was always like, you got to invite, like invitation is the answer, like invite people to the service. I set out one morning, and I think it was probably like 9 a.m. And I decided that I was going to invite 100 people to church. And so I had a big stack of inviter cards, and I had my phone with Instagram installed on it. And I was going to invite all these people to church, and I was going to take pictures with them and like count down on social media and do all this stuff. Like, I don't know if it was like a, hey, look at me, or I wanted to like encourage. I don't know what I was doing. I couldn't even tell you my motive back then. But I sat in my car in a McDonald's parking lot for probably 10 or 15 minutes trying to psych myself up to actually go invite a stranger to church. Now, somebody might hear this story and say, well, the problem was you're inviting strangers. You were inviting people or you worked with or whatever. But I was the same deal. I moved here and I didn't know anybody.
Yeah, you're parachute.
Yeah, I was parachute. I go to this neighborhood where I really don't fit in because I'm Hispanic, but I'm half and I don't speak Spanish and it's not my culture, right? But I show up and here's this guy, who was a skateboarder and like a graphic designer and photographer, like who, whatever. I don't know how to describe that, but I invited 100 people to church, right? And it was tough, but once I kind of got into the flow of it, I did it. And anyways, the end of the story is one family came to church that Sunday and then never came back, and then I never saw any of the other people that I talked to invited to church. And actually later on, a couple years later, one of the guys that I was in a picture with inviting him to church died in an accident at work. And so I'm like, I invited that guy to church. Well, and then I'm just like, could that have been a deeper conversation? Right. But anyways, it's hard and it doesn't always pan out. And, a lot of people don't know a lot of people. And so it's
Right.
almost like it's hard to, how do you get people to get out of their comfort zone?
Yeah.
I'm the pastor, I'm the planter. Yeah, I picked up my life and I moved to Wichita with everything in the back of my car. But when you put me on the spot and say, go invite people to church, I sat there
I have
telling myself, I have to do this because if I don't do this, who are you?
have
Do you
some
even
thoughts.
believe? Go ahead.
I have some thoughts. You and I mean, where your mind is and your heart and what you want to see happen, I'm very close to that, especially
I'm right there.
with what we're doing,
Totally
even in our
resonates.
context at Living Water. We're very much trying to, the missional buzzword like that. That's us. That's what we're doing. And it's been a super interesting conversation to have, and especially with us shifting paradigms and methodologies and all that stuff to try to God's kind of taken us down this road where what we've done has changed. So we launched large, went in, met, in church, banners, donuts, sound system, worship, the whole thing. The goal of church planning, it's what you do.
We
So
didn't do donuts. I wonder if
that's where you went wrong because you should have done Hertz Donuts.
we did donuts on Easter, Dunkin' Donuts. We had
And you blew
enough.
doors.
You do Dunkin' Donuts if you're the East Side. Never mind.
Well, actually, we got them from the East Side.
Did you?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, and by the way, we had enough donuts for everybody to walk home with a dozen.
There you go.
Yikes.
That's even greater than the miracle of the 5,000.
Oh my gosh.
There was more. He doubled. Anyways. Okay. So for us in our context, what we saw was I actually think everyone wants to live this way. I think people hear it and they think that's right. That's what I want to do. Now there's a disconnect. There's this disconnect that I'm finding with our community to where it's where does desire and overflowing from who you are, where does desire and identity, there's this disconnect between those two to where it's I have a desire to live that way versus there's this point where a light switch flips internally and it's I'm going to live
That's
that way
just who you
because
are.
it's who I am. It's this overflow of who you are. And so in our church's case, by all outside sources looking in, we're shrinking, there's people stepping out, there's all of that stuff, but at the same time we're praying and having conversations going, nope, this is the right thing to do, this is the right thing to do, this is the right thing to do, and we are committed to a multiple year process, however long it's going to take for us to continue to become more like Jesus so that this overflowing can happen from the inside out. And that's the only way. And I really wrestled with this just do it. Just do it. Just do the things.
Do the thing.
And then God finally got a hold of me one day and was like, dude, who do you think you are to think that you can motivate someone enough to live this way?
Right.
And this is Jesus. We're having this conversation and I'm like, I'm going to teach them the equipping. There's these steps, there's this blah, blah, blah. You can host parties and barbecues and your neighbors and all that stuff. I'm there. And to where he goes, dude, you weren't there 3 years ago. People are in different places now. And so it was almost like I had this light bulb switch that was hey, I'm going to do the work in them. And I just need you to love them and to pastor them and to help them be more like me. And it's going to flow. And guess what, Chris? It's not going to be on your timeline. So I'm not saying this is what Jesus is saying to you. In my case, in this instance, in our context, when we identified the disconnect between identity and desire, it was well, of course. Yeah, that totally makes sense. I can't change anyone. Only God can do that.
Right. I was going to ask you, is there any part of that process that I don't know, I want to ask you if you wish you could go back there, but it's not where you're at now isn't where God wants you to be, but was there a place where you just felt like you were kind of grooving with who you are, with the equipping, the teaching, the discipling, you're in this community, whether it's 9 or 12 or 20, that maybe that could have just been a good place for you to be without the pressure or expectation of launching the service and starting the programs and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, if I'm not typically a second guesser. I make a decision.
Yeah.
I've thought it through. I've prayed it through. I've sought wise counsel, and then I move forward.
Yeah.
And then I won't often second guess. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I don't typically, and I'll learn from it.
Right. For
But I'm
sure.
not going to do this, woe is me, I just made another bad decision.
Yeah.
But if I if I could do anything over again, it would be that I would not have launched.
Okay.
And if I had lost people in that, then I lost people.
Now, okay, so let me clarify. When you say not had launched, you're not saying not have moved here, assembled the team, gathered the team.
Correct.
You're
Yes,
talking
good
back in
call.
like February.
Right. Back in February when they're looking at me saying, we either do this or we're out.
Okay,
like,
gotcha.
We need to do
It was almost that pivot. It was like that. What do they call those moments? Like
Pivotal
it was just
moment?
a pivotal moment,
Right.
like left or right. You're going down this road or that road.
Right. Yeah. If there's I look back at all the decisions that, in church planners, we make 1,000 decisions a day, maybe multiple thousands. And some of them are trivial, like how do we want our logo to look? Do we want it to be vertical, horizon? Like, do we want an emblem? Do we not? All the way to like what our doctrine's going to be to you got a crisis with a family. I mean, like, so church planners, what we're dealing with is
Frosted or filled donuts?
fill.
Always
But you didn't
frosted,
have
bro.
that problem, bro. You're
No, do I buy a coffee machine? Do I borrow a coffee machine, or do we go high class and pick up Starbucks on the way every week?
Bodum pour over.
So
Dadgum.
so but I get there's 1,000 decisions we make, and I can't go back and fix every one of them. But if there was a decision I could do over again, like I would not have done that. It would have been to have said, we're not going to launch. We're gonna wait.
Okay.
Can't fix that at this point. I learned from that, but we go out. My team, my management team says, you got to shut down. I get it logically. I even get it in my head, in my heart. I'm like, yeah, we got to. This makes sense. This is June of 2019, this
okay.
year. But
right.
went on a mission trip. And a friend of mine on the mission trip said, hey, I don't know what's going on, but I just need to tell you that the Lord really has spoken to me, and I'm going to jump on a limb. He said, but you need to wait on whatever you're trying to decide about Frontline. And he didn't know anything. He's like, you just need to, or he just said, you just need to not give up. That's what it was. Not give up. And over the course of the next 3 days, I just was really leaning in on this mission trip, praying, okay, God, give me clarity, give me clarity, give me clarity. What I heard from the Lord was wait. Very clear. As frustrating it is for a firstborn type A personality that likes to take charge, the only time I like the word wait is when I give it. All right, let's be honest. So, but that's what I heard. And then I had to come back to, off this mission trip to our team and just say, the Lord has told me to wait. Well, what are you waiting for? I don't know. He's told me to wait. So that's even more disconcerting for some, but
Right.
I found contentment in that. That's June, July, August rolls around, and I just see the end. I know what's coming at this point.
Yeah.
And at this point, had you had more families that had said, "Hey, you know what? This isn't the thing," or had people kind of stuck around and hang tight, or
People hung in there. They waited to hear where things were going to head. We even tried getting into a building. There is a church that closed down, that merged. There's a sweet old church just south of WSU that I thought, maybe we get into this place. That'll give us a new location. It'll give us a demographic.
Right.
And it just fell right through. And that was the Lord. I looked back. Here's where I really believe that God was calling me to wait on. In June, if we had shut down, the reason why I would have shut down was, you look at the data, and I would have said, this amount of people we're not giving, this amount of people we're not serving, this person, like putting a name.
these variables,
Right.
Yeah.
These 5 people were not engaging lost people. These 4 people were only showing up every other week, or whatever it was. And what I really determined was I was not going to leave church planting, nor was I going to leave ministry bitter. Like, not going to do it.
Good.
Heart hurts? Yes. Sad? Yes. Sort of like crushed, like you've been dreaming about this with your family since 2008. Yeah. There's a lot of emotion.
Yeah.
But the one emotion I didn't want to feel root up in me was bitterness,
That's good.
because I've seen it over and over and over again, and I couldn't do that.
If those people would have done this,
Exactly.
if they would have done this, then
Exactly.
this would have this would have been a success.
That's it. Like if we just had,
Right.
like I would say, hey, if I just had 5 more of that person, we would have made it.
Yeah.
But at the
Woulda, coulda, shoulda.
right, what transformed in my heart from mid-June when my management team told me to shut down, what transformed from then to mid-August was nothing about my group. That waiting period, I firmly believe, was God rooting out in my life any possibility within human reasoning of having bitterness.
Yeah.
And what happened was the reason why we had people that stayed on the launch team who weren't giving was because I let them stay on.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why we had people not engaging our culture was because I let them stay on. Like, it wasn't even about those people. It was about the fact that I was leading the mission of the church. And this is a decision I don't regret, and I look back very clearly. I sacrificed the mission of our local expression of the church for the relationships with these people. These people are my friends. These people have sacrificed in lots of ways. These people live on my side of the city. I will see them at Walmart, at Target, at another church, at a restaurant. The end of the day, I refuse to sacrifice the mission of our local expression called Frontline Church for the relationship and be one more church that damage relationships, that damage
that's
people.
good.
I was going to say that's so good.
And I don't regret that. Like,
Good.
hands down. Like,
Yeah,
and if
man.
I had to do that over again, I would do that over again.
One of the phrases I've used is that we spent in church planning a lot of time, energy, money, and people. People get spent.
Yeah, bro. I mean, I've said this on the podcast too. Like, people are the non-reusable resource of church planting. I mean, they are, and a lot of times, you know, it hurts to know. I just had a buddy of mine get married, and very early on in our church plant, things didn't go well, and we ended up kind of not being friends.
The relationship
but the
was
relationship
stressed
was
and-
stressed
yeah.
and strained, and so there was distance. He left, and I saw him get married here just recently, and it was so awesome because God's done so much in his life, but it was also so sad when on the way home, I was talking to my wife, and I was like, I'm just so sad that I'm not a part of his life right now, and that his story, when he looks back at our church and who we were, is one potentially, I'm speculating, one that was not a positive experience, one that was negative, one that was not filled with Jesus, one that, you know, that he just had a negative experience. And that happens so much, not just in church plants, but in churches. People get burned, and I think that it's awesome that you didn't want to, you know, leave a wake of bodies,
Right.
You know, sacrifice them for the mission of Frontline Church.
I just couldn't do it. And I look back, and this was incredibly hard and painful season, I think, for some of the folks in our church, for our family. Like 7 days into launching in February, March 1st, my father-in-law in Connecticut passes away.
Oh, man.
And we, you know, that's a couple weeks right into the gate of launching. Then, you know, we moved my mother-in-law out here, and I'm so thankful we did. Gives us a chance to serve her, minister to her, have her close by. But all those things still pull. And I just remember, you know, part of the two, I think God was just rooting out for me was, and I'm still trying to figure this season out now. Like
Yeah,
really-
you're pretty fresh from, you know,
Right.
fresh from this. It's like the Band-Aid, you can still feel the sting, I would imagine, from
1
ripping
month
the Band-Aid
ago.
off.
It's been about a month.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so there's still a lot of hurt when I see people. There's just, man, I miss them. And I know that there's a group of them meet on Tuesday nights still in community, and we've been invited to come and hang out with them. And we don't, because we need them to kind of figure out what their next steps are without us there. But for us, one of the key things, and I remember calling my friend who I used to work with, who's heavily involved in church planting in the city. I remember at the beginning of developing a launch team, I called him up, said, "Hey, what advice would you give?" And he just wouldn't give advice. Like, he's just like, I'm sort of done giving advice for church planting. But then later on, he sent me this message and he said, "Hey, here's one piece of advice that I want to give you. Get the hell out before it hurts your family."
Yikes.
And so I remember after it was public, after it was official, I texted him and said, "Hey, I'm not sure why I did that."
You were typing. It was your typing
I was
deal.
typing on a major keyboard, like a Commodore 64. That's why I was way out here.
Yeah.
I remember saying to him, "Hey, just want you to know that we shut our church plant down. I got some really good advice from this guy who told me that I need to get the hell out before it hurt my family." And he's like, "Well, it sounds like the only good advice you got from this guy." And I'm like, "You gave me more than that." But the point is, kind of one of the questions you all asked me beforehand was sort of like, what did this do to my family? Some of that's a little unknown.
Yeah.
Because we're still in it.
Right.
I think there is, for some of us, a loss. Like, we're missing this group of people that we loved to run with, that are dear friends of ours. The toll of just what this does to a family. But I also think that there was a lot of blessing for our family to be involved. For me, I hope my kids look back on this from years from now and say, Dad was willing to take a risk.
For sure.
Dad and Mom were willing to put it all on the line, to sacrifice what they have, both time and finances, to make this a go. Yeah. Dad and Mom love people in their city who are not like them. And Dad and Mom will do whatever it takes. And so I think my kids, they haven't voiced it that way, but I think they've seen that. I hope they've seen that. And I hope someday that resonates with them.
For sure.
But not at a cost.
Yeah.
To destroying my family. Because I've been there, and some of us in ministry think that's noble. But here's the reality. 23 years in ministry, here's the reality. 5 years from now, that person you helped out with in a crisis moment barely will even remember your name.
Right.
Your kids, your wife, they're going to remember how many crises you went out after everybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there has to be...
There's got to be boundaries.
Right. Like, you love people, you serve them well, but your family's got to be the mission. And that's, for me, that's been a big takeaway. So that's sort of, kind of all over the place, but that's our church planting.
So good.
And so we shut that bad boy down. It was hard. I said a little trite there, but it was hard. I know there's some people that were like right on, like, you needed, like, part of the team saying, this was a wise decision. Yeah. There were some that were like, you need to shut this down now. There was somebody that said that, which was good to hear. And then there were some that were like, can't you just hang on? And I get that. And I appreciate their hearts. So that's our story.
So one of the points we brought up last episode
with Travis.
Did you watch or listen to that entire episode?
I watched the first half live, and then I watched the second half on my own.
Oh, okay.
Like later on.
Yeah. So one of the things I brought up was being able to recognize that maybe somebody's not a planter, but there's something else. Right. So to be able to sit down with somebody and say, hey, you know what? I don't know that you're going to be a great planter, but you'll be a great this or a great that. But then it's like, well, we don't do that, and I don't know who to send you to. There's not really funding for that kind of situation. My question for you is, what do you think your
kingdom purpose?
Yeah, your kingdom purpose. Like, if you could just X, Y, and Z without maybe all the pressures or expectations of what the church planning model or paradigm you were in brought, like, where do you think you would thrive and flourish?
Sure. That's a great question. I think some of them still trying to figure out.
Yeah, because you still have value to the body, like your heart to equip and to help people engage. Like, the people that you came around, not to put them down or anything, but again, we said maybe they weren't ready for that. I mean, or whatever it is. Like,
right.
If you got around a group of people that were like that, and caught that vision and said yes, and maybe got behind you or you got behind them to help spur and motivate them, I think you could exist in this place where maybe you're discipling 10 or 15 or 20 people in that way, and maybe people are rotating through as you're sending them out, but you'll never get to 150 on a Sunday morning or never get to 500. You see what I'm saying? Like, I think in kingdom business,
here's the paradigm that you succeed in.
Right.
And it's if you plant a church that does this, and it's got these metrics and there's these expectations.
Well, it's the kingdom. We have posts, and the Lord sets us up and puts us where we need to be. And it's like military. There are military posts, and not every base is as big as the next base, but there's presence.
Right.
And there's a few, and then there's a lot, and they're all working their part of the deal.
Yep.
And so that's what I want to know, if you know where maybe your part of the deal is.
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things I learned in this process is hate's probably a strong word. So Mom, if you're watching, I know you don't like that word. So hate's probably a strong word, but
Strongly dislike.
Yes. It's not life-giving. There we go.
Okay.
Preaching on a Sunday morning is not life-giving to me. Mm-hmm. Especially if I have to face criticism around style, around length of time. Like, I'll take criticism all day long around the meat, the teaching. Did I come at this at a philosophical or theological angle you disagree with? But sit there and text me and tell me to preach with more passion or energy.
But so you were in a position to where that criticism came your way.
Like 10 days after my father-in-law passed away.
Oh.
And I remember sitting on the couch when I got the text message saying, I don't think I can do this for life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like my personality, like, I just know this won't be good for me. This won't be good for others.
Yeah.
No. Oh no. So that for me, and I kept having that same sort of experience with a couple of people. And I think, honestly, I don't think they were intending to be rude or mean.
Or a butthole, but they were.
But I also don't think they thought through the...
I'm just being honest. That's terrible. Who does that?
I'm not sure how we recover from that one.
No, I'm just being real. This is just honest. That's kind of... Anyways.
So, but I remember thinking...
Speechless.
Like, pastors will face that every week.
Oh, yeah.
Of some level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you're in student ministry, you got the kid that every now and then you hear, oh, they don't like your style or whatever, but they don't ever come to... But it was like 2:00 on a Sunday afternoon, and like it's 10 days after my father-in-law passed away, and like you can't actually. So I just knew, and what I found was it actually wasn't life-giving, and when I had to preach from, I remember feeling like I had to be that preaching, teaching center. Like that's what these folks were showing up for. They didn't say that, but that's what I felt like. And the deeper I got, and the more meatier I got, the more I felt like they liked it. And I think to some degree for some that was true. But the less I was walking away, or the more I did that, the more I was walking away from our mission of keeping the mission front and center.
Sure.
Like I want an unbeliever or non-church person to walk through these doors and walk out changed because of what God has revealed to them.
Yeah.
And not that it can't happen by doing a deep in-depth study in Romans, which is what we were doing.
Yeah.
And so all of those things kind of coming together has made me start thinking, okay, what is it? All the way back to September of 2018, one of the last conversations I had with my coach just before he took a sabbatical, I remember saying to him, if this thing never takes off the ground, but I get a job in our city and I keep doing what I'm doing, loving my family, loving my neighbors, sharing Jesus with people, I want to be perfectly content with that.
Yeah.
I need to get there, because let's be honest, you can have all the money in the world and all the people in the world, and if Jesus is not in it, and Matthew 16, Jesus says to Peter, upon this rock, like it is his church.
Right.
He will build the church.
Yeah.
And either he is going to build Frontline, the local expression of his church, Frontline, or he's not.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to force the hand of God to do something he is not
nor
in.
nor can you.
Nor can you.
Right.
Or do I want to think so pridefully of myself and my talent or whatever mere talent I have to think that I can do that? And I think that that's the verse I've kept before me. Jesus, this is your church. So when I shut it down, it's still your church. Your work is still happening in the city. There are still expressions of your work going on in this city. And so for us, what I just said is, God, I need you to help me find a job in this city. Mm-hmm. I mean, let's be honest, 23 years in student ministry, a year and a half in church planting, you're marketable to be an associate pastor.
Associate pastor?
No knocking on associate pastors, but I mean, that's the reality. That's what I'm marketable for.
Yeah.
And so I put my resume out. I just kept hearing, sorry, you're not qualified. And finally I get someone that calls me back 9 weeks after I sent my resume for a hospice chaplain. Mm-hmm. And you're in the trenches. You're meeting up and rubbing shoulders with the hardest moments of people's lives. Ugh. And I will tell you, even the hardest day that I've had being by the bedside with a family when their family members passing away has been incredibly life-giving.
Wow.
Because you get to be a representation both in presence and in word and deed of the work of Jesus Christ.
Right.
Gosh, that's so good, man.
And so to tell you, do I know what my job is going to be? Do I know how I'm going to fit into the local church? I'm not to what God wants to do with us in our kingdom. I don't know what he's going to do with our family. I know for this season, we have settled into a church. We didn't intentionally say, yes, this is it, but we've just have gravitated towards a church. We're being fed. We, at some point, will get involved with a life group community, and we'll begin to serve in some way until he gives us clarity. At the end of the day, if I never make it back into professional paid ministry,
right,
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the questions that I want to ask is, but I want to preface it. Our stories they're different in the sense they're different, but I think that there's a common point to where when you have something like this, when you go through something as life-changing as planting a church, working for a church, or anything like that, to where you step back and you have time to process and really look and go, okay, what was God wanting to do in me during the season, and you process, and it's a long time that you go through that, and you're walking through, and Jesus is showing you issues in your heart, and it's like, no, God, I want to look at how things could have gone better, and he's like, nah, I want to look at you. I don't want to look at your heart. I think that guys like us that come out on the other side of that are prime for being released to help identify and make a shift in the way that church planting, ministry, methodology, all of that. You take all of that's done because we were a part of a system where we did things the right way. Now, granted, maybe those weren't necessarily the wrong thing. Maybe you could have had, this factor, and this factor line up. I tend to fall in line with, you had everyone saying, you guys were born for this. You could do this. This is it. This is in your blood. But for whatever reason, and I tend to lean on the side of, you had every reason humanly possible to succeed, from experience, from passion, from whatever, that only God would have to intervene to make it not happen. And there's something on the other side of that. And so my question to you is, do you think that there needs to be church planting reform? And I'm not trying to bait you into anything, but I'm just curious, because you launched a certain way and you did certain things that are kind of like widely accepted practices, You do the launch meetings, and you do that. There's certain things that you do. Right. So do you think that things need to change, that maybe expectations need to change, or anything like that there needs to be some sort of change for things to be differently? Or is it just solely, no, that works, God's just got to be behind it? Or is it you can do anything in God as long as God's behind it and he's leading you to do it?
It's a great question. So I want to make sure that the things I say, if they had happened, I still think we'd be in the same place.
Right.
Because either God's in it or he's not. But I look back, and there were some things, even though the church that sent us out, they just championed us. And I remember them praying. I remember on a Sunday morning, the executive pastor praying and the lead pastor praying, saying, we believe that God is going to use this family and this church to reach thousands. And I remember going, yeah.
Amen,
Yeah, like
Lord.
thousands are
Right.
going to be changed. Now, we'll say this. If one person's life was changed, those 18 months were well worth it.
For sure.
And that happened. And that's that data point where you can't put a price tag on.
Yeah.
There are some things I think that our city, Christians, the churches in our city have to rethink through about church planting. And I think we almost have to think through it about it from the city in Wichita and then what I call the suburbs. Like I live just off of Mays Road. So church planting looks very different there than it would perhaps like downtown and what God's doing down here.
Yeah.
The reality is to plant a church in this day and age, most guys are going to have a full-time job to make it a go, and they're going to have to know that it's going to be hard work for 5 years.
Sure.
I'm in a season in my life, I just eventually couldn't do that. I couldn't give up 5 years of not being paid, and those weren't reasons why, but you look at the toll on the family. The reality is I couldn't offer kids programming. And I got another church that's taken off that's got all the bells and whistles.
Sure.
And so there's this sort of this, when you live in a, let's just call it what it is, a white middle class, upper middle class, concrete community known as West Wichita, and you have to plant a certain way, whether we like it or not. And when you don't plant in that context, in the way that it works, it is going to be a lot of work.
Right.
And so we weren't trying to plant in that way, and it made it harder for us.
Yeah.
And I went to a lot of churches in this city, and this is what I would do. I'd meet with their pastor. I would share our vision. I'd share what God is doing. I would even give the numbers. Hey, there are 60,000 people on our side of the city alone that are still disengaged from the church, even though there's all these churches.
Yeah.
I'd give those stats. And I would ask two things. Hey, do you have 2 families or 3 families or 1 family in your church? Like I'm talking about, like I go to East Side churches, knowing their families in their churches that are from the West Side, that could get behind our mission and reaching people that are disengaged from the church. And then I would say to them, hey, I know your church, and I know you guys are all about hospitality. You guys do that well. Or you give out Bibles. Your love is to put the Word of God in people's hands. And so would you be willing to buy us 500 Bibles? Would you be willing to just sponsor our first 4 months? I mean, it sounds trivial, but 4 months of coffee, which is a big deal. Like having someone pay for that. Like, can you get behind something like that? Church after church after church, it was no.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And what I felt like was, we're on our own.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Like
So
we're
you didn't feel is this
Unity.
the right word? The ecumenical church?
right. Yeah. Like I felt like we were on our own. The only people that I really felt like that were for us were other church planters who were in the same boat.
Right.
Who like you guys
Yeah.
couldn't give. Like you didn't have anything.
Sure.
You can borrow this. We just need it back by 11.
Right.
You can use it from prior to 9:45. So I just, in some of that, I think the church in Wichita has got to rethink this.
For sure.
We've got to drop our denominational namesake.
Yes, please.
Like we're not gonna I'm only gonna support this particular church plant because it's in our denomination, or that one because it's not in that denomination.
Right.
We've got to stop that in the city. We're a city, but we need to act in some ways like we're a large town, and we need to get on the same page.
Well,
And-
yeah, I agree. We need to recognize that we're all part of the same stinking kingdom.
Yeah.
Like seriously, and I for one had that church planter competition, like competitive spirit, when we planted in North Wichita with the churches that were around the community. We're better. We're going to do this. They don't know what they're doing, that kind of thing. And I mean, I had that mentality, and it exists, and it really,
It's a
really
nasty,
sucks.
It's a nasty part
But-
of religion.
It is a nasty part of religion. And I was just thinking of the scripture where Paul said, when I was among you, I decided to know nothing except for Christ and him crucified. And obviously he's talking about like he was evangelizing and saying this is going to be my focus, the gospel. But if that can be our heart as the church in Wichita, saying, look, when we sit down at a table, let's know nothing among ourselves except Christ and him crucified.
Amen.
And let's champion that message, that gospel, that love, that transformational trajectory, life trajectory shifting news, the gospel of Jesus Christ. And let's raise that banner, except it's not enough. Well, you're planning a church. Well, what denomination, or who sent you, or how do you feel about women in ministry, or where are you at with gay rights? I mean, it's Christ and Christ and Christ and.
Yeah.
And so in order for me to qualify you to receive funding or help or partnership, you've got to meet all this criteria.
Well,
And we've got to get, to some extent, we've got to get over that.
And I also said, on one hand, I've got some critique of the local church.
Sure.
The other hand, I also have seen some church planters like just pilfer from the local church and not want to give back to the local church. But here's what I'm convinced. I've been in the city for almost 7 years. I can name probably 14, 15 churches that could find it in their budget to fully fund a church plant for 5 years. They could do it.
Yeah.
I mean, what if every one of those churches said, we're going to fully fund a church plant for 5 years so that church planter doesn't have to work and his family, they can focus on their community, focus on building a team, focus on loving people that are far from Christ. Like, I'm all for overseas missions and supporting missionaries, but like the reality is people in our city are dying and not knowing Jesus, and we're sending off millions of dollars around the world, and we're forgetting about what's happening here.
Well,
and we've got to do it.
Yeah.
So
something I was going to say earlier, hindsight's always 20/20, right? And the Lord, he guides our paths. And I like to say that according to Scripture, our destiny is that we're conformed into his likeness. So that all of our life is that path, and that the journey is the destination, right? As we are living, knowing Christ, working on our salvation, undergoing transformation by the Spirit in us, being sanctified, being conformed into his likeness, that's going to happen regardless of our circumstances. But God will use our circumstances to aid in that process. And so you've gone through a process of church planning. You've gone through this season, but the Lord has always been there. He's always had a plan for you, and the plan is still the same, and you're on your way, and it is happening. It's like the here but the not yet kingdom, right? Like you are in Christ, you are forgiven, you are sanctified, but you're being sanctified, you're being saved, but you have been saved. We will be saved, right? So it's all of this happening in your life. And so anyways, all that to say, I wish that we could somehow, maybe even by deep prayer and discernment, testing and knowing what the true will of God is, as we read in Romans, is there some way that we can get ahead of these kinds of situations within God's will?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you were out of his will, but how can we identify up front that Stephen Christian wants to pour into people who want to reach the lost? He wants to equip. He doesn't want to preach on a Sunday morning. He doesn't, that's not that doesn't bring him life.
Right.
So then your sending church says, hey, you know what? Why don't we, instead of trying to send you out to become your own thing and whatever, why don't we be a base for you to create a ministry where you can do what you love to do, find people who want to engage Jesus.
Those are kingdom dreams.
And you become, that becomes a ministry extension of their ministry, so that you run, you're a capable leader and teacher and equipper. And so it's like your sending church is creating a ministry where you are the guy and you're living and functioning in that. You're not wasting the money on, renting the zoo or whatever it is, right? Like you can,
I got stuff to say.
You can,
sorry,
you can better utilize resources. And so you've got all these plants that go out and then they shut down. And then the guys come out on the other end saying, like, for a long time when I came out of our church plant, I said, you know what? I never wanted to be the number one guy. Maybe I'm a better number two. Maybe I'm not even on staff.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah. Maybe I'm not on staff. Right? Maybe I just run a podcast for the rest of my life. I don't know. I consider this ministry. Right? I interact with people all the time through email and chat and that kind of stuff. So anyways, So what I'm saying is, how do we get on the other end or on the front side of this? Stop sending guys out. Stop causing anxiety and depression. Stop putting pressure to launch and be big. Stop spending resources on buildings and that kind of stuff. And have ministries birthed out of the ministries that feel healthy enough financially and spiritually to pour into somebody and send them out.
Yeah.
I think actually that's probably like week 4 of this series, which would be great. I mean, because I think you're asking great questions, and I don't know if we can solve that just locally. I think that's got to be nationally, globally, but maybe we figure that out and we start bringing leaders together in the city. I will say one of the things I've had to fight against, I'll have people that'll say to me, "Oh yeah, I know so-and-so. Didn't his church plant fail?" Well, if you count the fact that they saw 32 people start following Jesus in the time they were in existence, and there's 31 of those 32 are now still engaged in the church. If that's your definition of fail, then they failed.
Yeah.
So I had to fight against that myself.
Sure.
Like, did we fail? Did we not? No, the reality is we didn't fail. I believe in this season. But I also look back and say, part of the deal was my church saw like this rise up within me. So I worked for one church. They really got me to a point where I was caring deeply for people who were disengaged from the church.
Yeah.
Went from there to a new church in a different role. And while there, that excitement continued to grow. And I think just naturally what happens is when you see someone that can lead, and someone who can be a good communicator on a Sunday morning, and they have a passion for reaching people that are disengaged from the church.
Church planner.
Boom. There we go. Let's go. Let's get them out there.
Yeah.
And rather than harnessing and saying, how do we just use that in our church or in the local church to be... Now, I have one of the guys on our church plant team, one of the things he said was, maybe Frontline just needs to be a parachurch sort of ministry where you're helping the local church to equip and train people.
Yeah, why not?
Right. That's a possibility down the road. That's not where God has me right now. Mm-hmm. Is it something that he might open up down the road as that kingdom voice piece that he still uses me? Perhaps that becomes something, but that doesn't just have to be what I do. So I just think there's room for this conversation to say,
absolutely,
what do we do with these men and women?
Yeah,
that's fine. You step on those toes.
So,
that's okay.
I mean, that's the reality. I grew up in a culture where women did great job with Sunday school and with caring for people.
And potlucks.
And
Don't forget the potlucks.
Potluck Pot Providence in the church group I was with, all right?
Quilting ministries.
And So, yes, quilting ministry. My time at seminary, regardless of my theological conviction, my time at seminary really taught me this, is that at any moment Jesus is coming back.
Right.
I want to believe and live the way Paul believed and lived. There are a lot of men that are in ministry that shouldn't be in ministry, that are absolutely not capable, nor should ever be in ministry. And that's maybe a whole nother topic that we could get on some night. I know it's 9:07 now. But regardless of how we decide to parse scripture at this point and show, this or that about the role of men and women, if I've got somebody that's next to me that is fiercely in love with Jesus, they are gifted and talented to lead, and they want to see the kingdom of God advanced in our city, in our nation, in our world, I am no longer going to sit by and say, well, are they female?
Too
are they
bad,
male?
so sad.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't have time for that.
Right.
Because my neighbor who doesn't know Jesus stays that way.
Yeah.
He's got an eternal destination that's very different than mine, and I refuse at this point in my life.
Pray for the laborers, because the laborers are few. Right. Oh, hey, look, there's 100 women who want to be laborers. Nope, sorry, we prayed and the Lord sent women. Yeah, that's
we got
not
100
good
trays of macaroni, though.
Tell me what you were getting excited about.
Yeah.
Okay. I got to bring some salt because this is the episode to do it. So
Salt is good.
yeah, it's not the good kind though.
Okay.
I'm gonna get a little salty as far as, anyways. I think the big thing that needs to change. You look at the church planting world, okay, and it's not about planting churches. It's about planting a service and starting a service. And so I'm going to go off on this tangent because it exists when we make decisions as planters and as pastors and things like that to, in the early phases, well, we got to start having worship and we got to start doing this and pulling all of these things forward before we're even ready to, because it's what the people want. It's what they need because the service looks like this. You got to have some sort of refreshments. You got to have a really welcoming kids ministry. You got you are not a church if you don't have these things. And as long as there is an expectation that you are a community of faith, if you operate within the boundaries of this box, we're in it. Like, we're in a big pile of poop. And because listen, I'm serious, because here's what happens is, to the man or woman who feels a call to do something, their automatic thing is pastor. Well, what does that look like? XYZ, boom, expectations. Well, I could never do that. I could never do that. I could never be that. But what I could do is this other thing that is a kingdom dream that God birthed in me. And maybe I'm not a preacher, maybe I'm not a teacher, maybe I'm not a this. But when we say church planting has to be done this way, gathering a community of faith in a localized region has to happen. And oh, by the way, you have to drop, $250. And let's be honest, that's to barely get off the ground. If you really want to get off the ground, you got to drop $500 so that you can play ball with mega church down the street. Barely. And when I say play ball, that means create a product and an environment that is enticing enough to step away from that to step into this. So what ends up happening is church planners spend so much time, so much energy trying to market this product that they believe in, Jesus, by the way, but it has to fit within this box of a well-fit, well-oiled machine service. And that's not healthy for anyone.
And it has to become self-sustaining.
And it has to become self-sustaining, by the way. And so there's just all of these pressures to be just as good as the church down the road. Maybe not necessarily that the pastor wants to do that or feels that way, but the people that are leaving those environments to step into this. It's like, I'm already going to step back from, this kids ministry that's got a slide. Like, do you have a slide? They have a slide, and so, and hear me when I'm saying this, like, I don't hate services. I don't hate slides. I don't hate slides. I do think that we've taken the service and elevated it above so many other aspects that are beautiful about the bride of Christ and community and all of these other things. And so I think in order for church planting to be able to take a step forward in gathering a community of faith in a region, we have to put it in its appropriate order. It is of value. It is not the most valuable thing. And when we can flip that script, and when we can begin to make changes and help change mindsets, it's why we do this podcast, because we want to help bring about change. Conversations like this are so extremely valuable because it gives people insight into the system.
Right.
So,
and I think what you've just said is key. Is at the end of the day, I couldn't produce something both physically and from my heart that competes with what else is out there.
Yeah.
And that was the rub for me. Like,
because isn't this enough? Isn't Jesus not isn't loving others enough?
I'm sorry I don't have a separate space for kids ministry. I'm sorry you have to hear the kids that are over there. Like, that's what I felt like.
Yeah.
I want to be able to say, thank God there's 5 kids over there. And so what if we have to hear them? But in the way we do church planting, or the way we do church, the church planter is almost like 5 steps behind.
Yeah.
Because, and here, I mean, this is the other piece is I understand the sustainability piece.
Yeah.
I get that, because if you take guys who've been in ministry long enough, the reality is, like I've been telling people the last 10 years, oh, you want to be in ministry? Great. Go get a different degree. Go get a business degree. Go get a journalism degree. I don't know about that one. Go get a marketing. Go get something else other than ministry. You can learn this stuff.
Jesus loves journalists, by the way.
Yes.
Continue.
I mean, you can learn this.
Yeah.
I mean, I have read hundreds of books. I did a minor or whatever you call it in seminary on church planning. I've read every single book that Ed Stetzer could put out and recommend. I've just read hundreds of books in church planning and gospel sharing. There's only one book I've read that actually made a hill of a difference in my church plan, and that was Scripture.
Yeah.
All those other books, it's
Jesus juke.
Guess I didn't mean for that, but yeah.
Yeah.
That's really they didn't help our church plant. It actually made me more frustrated.
Wow. That's
because
interesting.
those books set expectations. We have Scripture that makes the introduction.
Right.
I mean, to the person that changes everything.
Right. Like if you just do, and we admire these men and women, if they've done great things in church planning, I'm not knocking that down.
Yeah.
Then we put it in a written format, and then we sell it to.
The problem is when you make a description the prescription.
Right.
I am describing to you my experience with church planting. If you do this, then you will succeed. Right?
Yeah.
Grow your church to 200 by implementing these 10 things. Grow your church to 500 by implementing these 15 things after you do those 10 things.
Yeah.
And we take our story, our experience, what the Lord has done here, and then we present it in such a way that other people, maybe inadvertently we present it that way, other people grab onto it and think it's a prescription for success.
We need to make, Sam McVeigh Jr. just posted, make disciples, this idea that...
Yeah, Sam, what's up, Sam?
We need to make disciples. I mean, that's the end. It's the end of the day. We happen to go, so I don't want to trash the mega church.
Yeah.
We happen to go to a really large church in our city.
Sure.
Right now, I went there thinking I was going to drown out and nobody would know us.
Yeah.
That
Didn't happen.
didn't happen.
Good.
And so, it's been okay. At the end of the day, though, we need to make disciples no matter what the context is. But we do need to help the guy or the woman, the man or the woman who wants to plant a church, that wants to start a gospel-centered community, that it doesn't have to look like that.
Right.
So how do we help the church now? And this isn't fixing it right now. This is, I think, helping to shift the paradigm for 5 years from now.
Right.
Right.
I think one of the biggest questions, or one of the biggest things we can do right now, is begin to ask more questions like, what if? What if you would have stayed where you were at and poured your heart out for reaching the city and disengaged people right where you were, rather than? So I think we need to begin to ask, what if? Oh, you want to plant, or you've got this heart, this, that, and the other. Well, what if this? Well, what if that? Well, what if this? Well, what if that? And honestly, it's interesting when I've done marriage counseling in the past, a lot of the questions I ask are, what if? Well, what if you find out this? Well, what if that happened? What if that happened? Because then you really begin to check your heart and say, well, what if? I think I'm a church planter. I think I'm a preacher. Well, what if you get 2-3 years in and then nobody's there? Who are you then, right? What is your value to the kingdom? But apart from the paycheck and the platform, right? And so I think that's where we're going to really begin to start to see how the Lord has gifted people and the way he's put them together. And instead of us saying, okay, God, you gifted this person this way, well, where do they fit in our strategy? We begin to recognize that, and we say, okay, how does he fit in your strategy?
The other thing too with church planning is whenever your back is against the wall and you got to pay rent and you got to do all these things, and there are things that have to get done, you make decisions based off of logic and reason, and because you have to make those decisions. How can you help lead a body of believers when you start thinking, oh man, the money's not coming in, we got to pay rent, we got to buy this, we got to buy that, and there's hard. All of these things that we have to do, and so you start thinking about those things that need your automatic attention, which is mostly money to pay for things and your paycheck. and I'm not saying pastors shouldn't be paid. That's not the discussion I'm getting into. But I am saying when you have to focus on money, it really changes the way that you lead a church.
Yes.
I mean, because you're looking at the bills and you're going, we can't pay the bills. What do we do?
Yeah.
And so, anyways, we're getting pretty close to probably needing to wrap up.
Yeah.
So I'll just say this.
Sure.
At the end of all of this,
Finish it out.
for me. 23 years plus, I don't know, whatever it is. I still love Jesus.
Amen.
I still love my family. I still love this city that God has placed us in.
Mm-hmm.
And I still love his bride.
Yeah.
And that had to be key for me, because the moment I stopped loving Jesus or his bride, now I'm not saying we don't critique it.
Right.
I'm not saying you don't want to make it better and lean into more what Jesus has called his church to do. But what I won't do is hate his bride.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful I'm not there. I'm thankful that God and I look back,
That's a blessing, man.
and that's what God had to do in me back in June, so that my heart wouldn't go there.
Right.
Because I knew if my heart went there, I would be so destructive. And I'm not going to, there have been moments where I've wanted to be just fly off on social media about this.
Yeah, don't do that. I've done that. People don't like that.
Yes, I know. But I'm thankful I didn't go there.
Type it out and then don't hit
And
send if you can find the
so-
discipline, because I've done that.
Or post it in the Salty Dogs podcast group.
There you
Podcast
go.
group.
So,
There's
hey,
the promo for
Yeah,
it.
there it is.
Thanks for having me.
Dude, yes. Thank you so much for
Keep
being
the
on.
conversation going. The
Yeah,
church
for sure.
needs it.
Yeah.
Man, I just want to say this. Thank you so much for reaching out and sending me the email and saying, "Hey, I want to come on and I want to talk." This has been so beneficial. Originally we were wanting to talk to somebody that was a little further removed, but I think God orchestrated this and worked it
Yeah.
out the way that it needed to, and you were absolutely able to sit down,
Right.
share your experience, not bash the bride of Christ,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of good that came from this conversation. So thank you so much. If you're someone that listened to this episode or watched this episode live, man, shoot us an email. Let us know what you thought about this and how this made a difference in your life. We'd love to share those emails too with Steven, and just
Yeah, for sure.
those things are so encouraging when we get those. Jason, where can they shoot us an email at?
saltydogspodcast@gmail.com. And so, or you can go to saltydogspodcast.com and then you can reach out to us there.
Hey,
Go ahead.
We have one more episode after this for the season.
We do. We've got one more. We've got Jeremiah Wood coming on.
Woo, woo.
And so,
great.
he's going to be great. Hey, we actually have a very special situation that's going to happen right here.
You got a
So
theme song?
I've got
is it?
Let's see if we can get it to happen.
Who is
Can
it?
you hear that?
What's going on?
Can you hear that?
Yeah.
All right, check it out.
Who you calling?
Good grief, who's calling at this hour?
Is that
Who
that Casey?
Who's that? Casey. You're live on the podcast, Broham.
Oh, dudes,
What's up, man?
what's been up?
Yeah, let the listeners know. You tell
Yeah.
us.
Dude, no, I'm in Connecticut right now. Actually, I'm working on the East Coast. Been out here for a little bit. I'm going to be out here all winter, actually, so.
East Coast, are you jamming some Biggie?
No, I'm a Tupac man myself, so. I mean,
Oh, dang! You're in you're in the land of the enemy, bro. You're behind enemy lines.
I know, I'm just trying to.
Every day we pray for
walking to
you
the promised land,
till the
so
day
take
we
it,
meet
yeah.
again.
What's been up, man? What were you guys talking about tonight?
So we've got Stephen Christian on. We actually he's a church planner here in Wichita. So we're doing a church planner discussion series, and we're ending out the season with like 3 episodes on church planning. And so just kind of talking about some church plant reform and how, we got to work together in the kingdom to see this thing through. But man, hey, we miss you, bro.
Yeah, no, I definitely miss you guys, and I've been on a pretty long hiatus right now.
Yeah.
Just walking through what I have to walk through, but no, I definitely miss being on the podcast and going whole ham, Christmas ham,
Whole ham.
Thanksgiving ham, all the hams.
Hams on hams.
And,
HAM is an acronym for hard as a mug.
Yeah.
And mug is a replacement word for another word we won't ever say on the podcast.
Yeah, you can't ever say that. So we like to keep it classy. So.
Yeah. Hey, give a shout out to our listeners, man. Say let them know what's up.
Are they even listening to me right now?
Yeah, you're in the mic, bro.
You're in the mic.
in.
You're live on Facebook, homeboy, and then it's going to go into the audio.
Oh man. No, I just wanted to say hey to everybody, and I probably miss you guys more than you miss me. That's for dang sure. Oh man. Yeah. So what's the deal, man?
With who? With them?
No, with everything, man.
Oh well, we're about to shut.
I want to have. Well, I know you're about to shut it down, but I want to have a conversation.
About what? When? Right now?
I don't know. Whatever. Yeah.
Oh, hey, we got to wrap it up. We've been going for about 2 hours and 10 minutes.
Wow. I'm super jealous.
Totes jelly.
Yeah.
Cool.
We'll have to put together a podcast in the
Yes.
weekends when I get back.
Yeah, we'll do a bonus.
A bonus episode?
Bonus.
Bonus.
Oh, is that what you said?
No, I said bonus, but you made it funnier.
Oh, I just heard it as bonus.
That's funny. Yeah.
That is funny.
Did you know that my favorite Star Wars character is Boba Fett?
Oh my gosh, these puns.
Hey, we gotta wrap it up and get rolling, man. So good to hear from you. I know our listeners will be excited to hear from you. So
Yeah, man. Mad love to everybody. You guys too, man. I'll be back soon. We'll do something.
all right, love you, man.
Take it easy, man.
All right, mad love. See you later, bud.
See you, bro.
Yep, bye.
See you later, Shores.
See ya.
All right, y'all.
Hey, by the way, Sam told me he just saw that he wants to buy me lunch. So
yeah,
Sam,
yeah.
I will be calling.